And so maybe someday we'll be there, and it'll be, hopefully the good dystopian, the good movies where we're just all on a beach, and the robots help us out. But I think we have a ways to go before that day happens, and
Yep.
if it ever happens at all. But certainly it'll be the case that, these tools will be more and more present in our day-to-day life and really just
Mhm.
help us do a lot of nice things.
This is L&D Unlocked, a series for L&D and HR professionals looking to unlock the future of learning and development. Presented by BizLibrary, L&D Unlocked is an ongoing series where we speak to industry experts and thought leaders about the future of work, workplace trends, and how your organization can prepare today for the challenges of tomorrow. Learn more at bizlibrary.com.
Welcome to another episode of L&D Unlocked. I'm your host, Chris Elliot, Chief Revenue Officer at BizLibrary. Fantastic guest with you today, Kurt Berglund, who is VP of Science currently at Highspot, career in technology, previous to Highspot at Microsoft. I had the opportunity to hear Kurt speak on a panel on generative AI that was hosted here in Atlanta by the Technology Association of Georgia, and was blown away. The moment I heard, I was like, we've got to get him on the show. And he very generously accepted. And I know you're going to want to hear what he has to say today. So Kurt, welcome. And if I can, first question, what is a VP of Science? Maybe you could share. Well, let's start there.
Let's start there. Yeah, no, it's a really fun job. At Highspot, we have a bunch of company culture things, but one of them is called Invent the Future. So we're trying to always kind of look forward a couple months down the road, figure out what's that next big thing. And so kind of as VP of Science, that's kind of my full-time job, is to figure out what the future might look like and go after it. And so obviously in today's world of the past year and for a while, AI, ML, generative AI, these large language models, they're all a huge focus. And so I get to have a real fun job, right, to play around with them day to day and figure out what this means for sales enablement and how we make some awesome customer value inside of Highspot by giving them to the people that use Highspot.
Love it. So Kurt, our audience, they're in HR, they're in learning development, talent management. If we could, I think there's so much both misinformation and just like lack of awareness. Can we start with the basics? How would you describe generative AI, and how's it different from other flavors of AI that we've had in the past?
It's a great question. I get, quite a bit. And then it's always fun to explain too, just because kind of demystify a little bit of what's going on in these large language models, these chat GPTs, because they do seem so magical, but kind of when you know what's going on under the hood, it's kind of informative how they work. And also cool too, to see how much they can do with how they've been trained on. So, AI itself is just a super broad category inside of computer science. And it's pretty much anytime a computer does something that kind of mimics human intelligence or cognition, that gets called AI. But this could be like a million different things. When you're playing a video game, you've got the AI going. If something just gives you a smart insight, it has AI going. And so it's a very broad category to say things are AI. But what most people tend to think about is kind of the field of machine learning, which is a subfield of AI. And that's where you're taking data, using that to have the computer learn a program based on the data. So the canonical examples are kind of, hey, can you predict a home price based on a bunch of variables? And people do a bunch of really cool models with that. But over time, another subfield emerged, which was deep machine learning. And so this is kind of where you're using these deep neural networks, things that are kind of looking like how the neurons in your brain work, to build these really complex models. And out of that subfield came generative AI and these large language models. So it's a form of, this kind of deep machine learning. And so, the way these things work, it's really kind of interesting. So, it all kicked off back in 2017 in this paper from Google called Attention is All You Need. And the insight they found was, hey, a lot of these like machine learning things, what they would do is, and they were looking at machine translation. So they're trying to take, English to French, Spanish, whatever. And so what was going on in there was what researchers traditionally did was they did each word at a time. And it kind of like chunked it through the machine and figured out what the translation was. But in this paper, what they found out was they said, well, let's just give it the whole thing. Let's give it the whole thing you're trying to translate and see if it does a better job. Turns out it did quite a bit. But then what people found was, hey, we can take that finding and we can apply it to other tasks, which actually let the machine get really smart at natural language. And so the one that happens here with kind of what you're seeing with GPT is it runs a task where its whole point in life is to predict the next word. So it takes in everything it's seen before and it tries to just predict that next word. And out of this is where all this magic comes. And so the reason why this is so good is, when we're trying to build a traditional machine learning model like that home price one, you normally have to start with just a lot of data. And the more advanced your model is, kind of the more knobs to tune. So you kind of think of these things as it's like your oven, except rather than like the 4 knobs to turn to cook your meal, you might have 175 billion knobs you have to turn, right? So with that many knobs, you need a lot of examples to show it where they should all be set to operate, it perfectly. And so this is this thing where, if you're gathering the data, it takes a lot of time. But where these LLMs, these large language models really excel is, well, they can just read the internet or any piece of text ever made, because the task they're trying to do is just to always predict the next word. And so you can take a book and you can make millions and millions of examples of just predicting that next word. So it gives them enough data to train. And out of this comes kind of these large language models, the ChatGPTs, where they're predicting that next word. And so that's kind of how it works under the hood. So, if you go to ChatGPT and you type your thing and you hit enter, behind the scenes, they're kind of just predicting the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, and kind of put it back in the machine, figure out the next one, put it back in the machine, predict the next one, and off you go. And so it's kind of a simple task. It's almost like, back in school when you would do those fill in the blank exercises. Mm-hmm. That's what it's been trained on. And out of that, you get all of this magic you're seeing in the world today.
Yeah. So first off, I can't fathom that many knobs. I struggle with, we got Thanksgiving coming up, with 4 knobs on the oven, much less 140 billion. So with that context, Kurt, that it's kind of next word prediction, as you put it, maybe could you segue into some of the cautions of leveraging a tool like ChatGPT, or maybe some of the warning labels you might put on it when it comes to the outputs?
Yeah, so these things, just because they are this predictive technology, they do understand at some level the data that they've been trained on. So I think anytime you're coming up to one of these new technologies, you kind of always want to ask the question of what data is it being trained on, and then who can see that data is something to be aware of. And so, as this has become more and more popular, you've seen kind of enterprise guarantees go into a bunch of these things. And so it's something to watch out for. So at least us at Highspot, we always make sure, we're always taking your security and privacy as the utmost safety. And so, we are not training a large language model on your data. We're just using the pre-trained one coming out of OpenAI. And that makes sure that we can get all of the benefit of the smarts it's learned by reading the internet, but not leaking anything that you might have proprietary going into it. Although they look super smart, the interesting thing is it's not that different than just a big calculator kind of predicting that next word. Like when you put the thing in to predict the next word, it doesn't actually learn anything new as part of that process. It just sort of goes into the machine, it comes out, it just runs a big math equation. So, sending it and receiving it, it looks magical, but it doesn't learn anything new from that process. But when you initially train it, that's where it picks up all the knowledge. So a lot of times I like to tell people that some way to look at it is, it's almost like, you're fresh out of college or school. You've learned a bunch of stuff in college or school. For these large language models, that is like the internet they've learned. And then when they do tasks, you kind of give it the next bit of information it needs to do the task. And that helps it kind of solve the problem. But it doesn't learn anything. It doesn't remember anything you've told it as part of learning that task. The base model, that is, yeah.
So with that, maybe could you explore a little bit, kind of, let's go with both sides of the equation. Maybe what are some of the cautions of the input, what you put in? I think there's a lot of privacy concerns and questions around that. And then maybe you could touch on, kind of in the spirit of it, it's not necessarily getting smarter, some of the hallucination examples and where, really kind of over-reliance could go quite wrong, because it's not always right. It's not a perfect system yet. So could you touch on both sides?
Yeah. So on the input, that's kind of the same thing. You just always kind of want to know when you're using one of these tools, like, are they training on the data or they're just processing the requests? That's always a good thing to look out for. And on the hallucination side, yeah, that's always sort of a worry. These are probabilistic models. When they're predicting that next word, they have a bunch they can choose from. And so they're trying to pick one with the highest percentage, and there's a bunch of techniques to do that. But there always is a chance, just like there's a chance when we're, talking or doing anything, that we'll say something silly. So it is this thing where you probably always want to kind of trust but verify. Think of it as a new hire where the work probably will be good, but you might want to just kind of take a peek before it does anything. And so the fun part, though, is that this hallucination issue, it's kind of a known thing in the research, and as we develop it. And there's a bunch of techniques we do internally, certainly at Highspot, other places as well, to kind of minimize the chance of hallucination as much as possible. So there's fun things you can do too, where when it outputs what it's doing, you can ask it to verify what happened. When you send it data too as well, you can say, hey, give me an answer, here's some context. That also helps it out too. So there are a bunch of ways to kind of help alleviate the chance of hallucination, but it is always something you want to be aware of, that the model, it might not be 100% correct, and so it's always good to proofread it, right? So yeah.
So Kurt, I think probably most of our audience by now hopefully is familiar with ChatGPT, but AI is now starting to work its way into productivity tools. For our audience, we're leveraging it with our products like BizSkills. But it's getting into tools across the organization. Let's start with maybe a discussion of how are you leveraging AI at Highspot, and then probably where we'll go next is like, what's the implication for the workforce and the skills that are needed? But maybe we can start with like, what are the early looks of leveraging this tech in the tools that your end users are taking advantage of?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So like that transfer paper I mentioned, we were sort of in on some of the early stuff, even 3 years ago, starting to put that into Highspot. So we've been seeing this stuff coming, for a while. And then when ChatGPT came out, for us as well as everybody else, we knew it was just sort of a watershed moment to jump on it. And so, we've been looking at where, there was enablement 1.0 for us, where there were siloed tools. Then came enablement 2.0, where they started to kind of work together. And then we see kind of the generative AI phase as putting us into enablement 3.0, where now you have this co-pilot to help you out during your tasks. And so for us, we kind of break it down into different categories. We see it helping with automation, advising you, co-creation, and then also the ability to answer anything. And so today in our product, you'll kind of see some of these things where for the automation, just standard tasks that are really important, but they can be time consuming. And just take a little bit of time that we want to put into a Highspot that's a button click away that helps you kind of get your tasks done. So one example is, for us, it's all about, when you store your content in Highspot, we want to make sure that it's well organized and governed. And a good part of that is having a description of every piece of content so that buyers and sellers know what it is. But, like if you have to read a document, come up with a summary, do all this stuff, it just takes quite a bit of time. It's hard. And then to write it too is hard. And so this is kind of where Copilot kicks in. We'll write the summary for you, and then you go from author to editor. You can just, tweak it to what you want, but it kind of helps you get started, gets over that writer's block.
Right.
On advising, when we're doing training and coaching, we can assess skills, just kind of be that advisor on the call. In co-creation, kind of just, we want to get away from anytime there's a blank screen, just have Copilot there to go put something on the page for you. Again, just to get you started if you need it. Because for me, at least, I don't know about other people, but certainly for me, having something on the blank page to get, getting over that writer's block sometimes is the hardest part of writing. And so it's nice to have a first start at where you can go. And then the last one is just answer anything in search. That's where these things are amazing too. They're just so good at natural language. It lets us do things like synthesize data, do Q&A in search, just get you at that answer you need quicker so that you're spending more time on kind of like maybe what you really want to do or strategic thinking rather than kind of sifting through information. So that's where we think it's just an amazing tool that will certainly be all through our product because it just opens up so many scenarios that we wouldn't be able to do before this technology showed up.
So, Kurt, that's fascinating. I was listening to some of the examples that you gave of kind of where the product started and where it's evolved. It reminds me pretty recently, a couple months ago, I published, it was a 5-part blog series. It's available on LinkedIn if you want to go look. And I describe the kind of the wave of Gen AI in three major phases. And I think that was echoed in what you outlined here. First is largely a pull model where the user has to go and put in a prompt or a command of some nature. And from there, we started to see evolution to suggested actions. And kind of the final piece, which you started to even touch on, is outright automation where you're setting parameters. Do you think is that a fair characterization? If so, kind of, if it is, where might we be kind of in the larger scheme right now?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair characterization for sure. Yeah, like you can kind of see it going from initially was kind of that pull, I think you said, right? Then you went to and then to phase two, and then phase
Kind of a
three.
prompt world.
Kind of the problem, yeah, and then kind of the full automation. The full automation, it's an interesting one. Probably April, May of last year, there are all these great things where they were trying to just fully automate everything. They gave the large language models total access. They do some things kind of neat, but it's a little bit of a scary process. So I think that one's kind of the frontier of the research where it's that full automation, and kind of back to our previous thing around hallucinations. It's probably a little scary to just let them do tasks fully independently. But I think more and more you'll see things where it will probably start it and then have you come in and check it later. But it's such a fast moving phase too. It's just fascinating to see it all. All move forward. Yeah.
So with that context, and you already alluded to it a little bit, feel free, whether it's for your users specifically or kind of the market at large, how does this change what the skills are that were needed to be successful in whether we're in the prompting phase or kind of interacting and engaging with suggested actions? Kind of what does that mean for me and the skills I need to really take advantage of the tech that is blossoming all around us right now?
That's a great question. Yeah, there was a great paper recently. It's kind of interesting. The initial research papers were all kind of the technical side, and now you're kind of getting maybe more of the social sciences coming up and figuring out what does this mean. And so I think it came out of the Harvard Business School. It was a thing they did with the Boston Consulting Group, where they gave some of the consultants access to ChatGPT and some not, and they had them do standard tasks. And what they kind of came out of the paper was they defined the jagged frontier of these kind of large language model things. And so what they meant by the jagged frontier was us as humans, we would look at some tasks that these large language models are really good at. And we would look at another task and say, that looks about as hard to me as the other task in terms of me as a human evaluating how hard it is. But the AI would do better or worse on different things. So that was kind of this jagged frontier. But the interesting thing they found was if you were doing a task that was inside the frontier, there was a noticeable productivity gain in making use of the large language model. And so I think they said, and what was even cooler was it was more noticeable from your bottom performers in your company. So your top performers maybe got 18% quicker. The bottom performers are getting 40% quicker at doing the task. So real clear gains. Now, if you're outside of the frontier, it didn't quite help as much or could get you in trouble because you trusted it too much. Maybe it's kind of back to the hallucination thing. You just thought it was right because it was really good at this other thing, but you needed to kind of guide it more. And I think for them, one of the skills they came out was it's this thing where the people who will best benefit from it are those who know how to navigate the frontier. So you can kind of know which task is a good one for it and then which task is not the best for it. And so I think that's going to be an interesting skill set as we kind of learn to make use of these things in our day-to-day life. And so it's like I think kind of similar to that too. I've always said, oh, hey, you're kind of, it's like you're hiring an intern or a new hire, and you've got this. Everybody's now a manager. Somebody else said, hey, we're changing. We're not going to be. We're no longer actors. We're now the director of the movie.
Right.
So you're kind of thinking more of those kind of strategic things. How do I make my actors do different things, and I'll focus on that. And so I think kind of these skill sets where you're learning how to best leverage it to kind of let you focus on maybe something else that you didn't have as much time for that you really wanted to focus on will be this great skill set to go forward to. And, that's kind of where it's, where do you get started? I think it's just playing with it and kind of knowing it. And then certainly in a tool like Highspot, it'll be more present for you to try it out. And so we're picking kind of those things within the frontier that really help out. But obviously, you can go straight to ChatGPT and try other things out too to kind of get a feel for where it helps and where it doesn't help you. And so I think that's going to be an interesting skill as people use it and play with it more.
Kurt, that reminds me, good time. We'll take a quick break here from our sponsor today's episode, BizLibrary. But I'll leave you real quick with this, and we'll pick it right back up. I saw it was this week a post that resonated, which was, at least for right now, your job's not going to be taken by Gen AI. It'll be taken by somebody who knows how to effectively use Gen AI. And that's where we are at this phase. So I'd love your thoughts on that when we pick it up after a short break.
At BizLibrary, we know that employee development and retention have never been more critical to your business. We help you build learning programs that create safe and inclusive work environments, elevate employee skills, and develop leaders who drive results. So now, you can take award-winning BizLibrary content and put it to work to help overcome your biggest challenges. BizLibrary, where learning happens.
All right, so let's pick it back up, Kurt. Early phase, where we are right now, immediate time horizon. That really struck a chord with me. That right now it's about getting very familiar with how to use it. To your great analogy, you may not be an actor anymore. You might be a director. Do you see what's your outlook right now on the impact of Gen AI as it relates to replacing jobs or augmenting jobs?
Yeah. I mean, I think for us here at Highspot, like our thoughts are it's going to be all about augmenting jobs. So that's why we kind of like terms like co-pilot. It's your friend, it's your buddy, it's there to help you out. And that's where we think it's going to help. The common thing we hear from most people, I think everybody's there, salespeople, sales managers, everybody, there's just never enough time in the day to get what you want done. And this is, I think, true across all industries. And so that's where we really think the AI and these co-pilots are going to come in and help, so that some tasks that maybe you really wanted to spend time on, but you just couldn't before, now become possible to really spend a lot of time on. Or you just freed up to do other things that maybe you wish you could have been able to focus on more. And so for us, we think that's where it's going to kind of come through, is that it is this kind of addition to your skills. It's going to superpower, give you superpowers, and just augment your own ability, as opposed to replace anything.
Yeah. Now, Kurt, what's your take if we take a slightly longer trajectory? This is a major topic on the panel that we heard, where I heard you present. And certainly, I would believe that there will be many jobs that are repetitive in nature, that the technology will ultimately replace that individual job. But that's not to say that the market at large won't create more jobs for that person to gravitate towards. What's your take on the longer outlook as we get into phase 2 and 3 and the examples that we were sharing earlier?
I mean, I still think it's gonna be the spot where it will help us do more and more of our thing, but having that human thought and knowledge and ability will still be really powerful. So I always think it's funny because as a software engineer, the first thing software engineers tend to do is try to build tools that do software engineering. So like I'm probably in like the worst possible spot of being eliminated for the AI writing code. But when you use it day to day, it's a great augmentation, but it's not quite fully there to replace you. Yeah. And I think on the underlying technology, there's still a lot of hurdles to overcome on the research and the technology side before we get there. And so maybe someday we'll be there, and it'll be hopefully the good dystopian, the good movies where we're just all on a beach, and the robots help us out. But I think we have a ways to go before that day happens, and if it ever happens at all. But certainly it'll be the case that, these tools will be more and more present in our day-to-day life and really just help us do a lot of nice things.
Hey, one element I was hoping you would touch on, you referenced earlier kind of the speed at which this is happening, and I recall from the panel discussion, there was a parallel drawn to the Industrial Revolution, where just wholly, approximately 80% of people went from living on farms to now living in urban centers, but that happened over the course of a generation. And we're talking about a transformation of the same, if very likely larger magnitude, but compressed down to 5 years, 10 years. It's not a generational cycle. What's your thoughts on the velocity? Do you think it's that order of magnitude on that type of a timeline? And what do we do with that? How do we think about that and getting our workforce equipped for a change that won't impact their kids? It'll impact them potentially, in a decade or less.
Yeah, I mean, it's moving so fast. It's really hard to know kind of where the next thing will happen. And so, are we like are we in the world of self-driving cars where we're always 2 years away from the self-driving car actually being a self-driving car, or are we in a world where like it's gonna go quick? Hard to say. I mean, last March and April, things were moving super fast. They're still moving incredibly fast. You're seeing things like these large language models are now pulling in images and video and text and all this kind of stuff that goes into it. But it's such a fluid time. It's hard to know 100% where things are going to go, I think, other than that for sure they will be present everywhere. Like they're not going to go away. So yeah. I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, it's hard to say. There's lots of things to work out on the underlying tech to make them really scale up. And what is the next advancement too? But I think they will for sure keep taking on more and more kind of intelligence and aiding us in that day to day. And so, it is that fascinating thing too. Like even on the schools, like I got pinged from this before, where the college I went to, the person who runs their intro CS program, since he knew I was at Microsoft previously, said, "Hey, can you ping the people that do the text to code editor and ask them, is there a way we can turn off Copilot? Because it's solving every intro CS problem before the student can even type it in, right?" And I'm sure for people with kids, if you say, "Hey, go write a book report on, Thanksgiving," it would just go write it immediately, right? And probably do a pretty good job. And so it's kind of an interesting thing of, as it relates to education, all these things, like when people are kind of, I guess, AI native, what are they, how are they going to operate in the world? How do they use the tool when it's something that they've always grown up with? And so, I don't know if I have a great answer, but it's going to be a fascinating time to see where things go.
That's a great, I think, call out, because I think about the significant changes that we're experiencing right now as digital natives are now kind of in decision-making roles in the B2B world, and their expectations are so wildly different from a previous generation. What will it look like when they're AI natives? Hey, Kurt, I could keep here all day, but let me give you a final question, because I thought it was so poetic. I thought it'd be a nice way to end. When I heard you speak last, there was kind of a discussion of what are going to be the skills that really prevail in this kind of Gen AI world. And you spoke to almost this transference of going from science to art, perhaps as being the skills that ultimately become, in some ways, the most needed and in demand in a world that is now administered by AI. But could you kind of expand on that for this audience? Because I thought it was just a really nice outlook, if nothing else, poetic.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it is the, kind of probably going back to that jagged frontier. It's that ability to kind of navigate with the tool set, where it's good, where it's not, and to kind of augment yourself. I think will be that really great place to go. And yeah, there probably will be a bit of art to that, of, kind of having that feel for where it goes. And then I think it frees us up to kind of go into that more creative mode, the strategic thinking, all this kind of stuff where you can use the tools to kind of do other things, and then kind of have yourself, use our humanness to its best ability.
I love that. That potentially in the like you said, in the good movie, maybe it's what allows us to be more human than we've ever been. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully, absolutely. Perfect.
Well, hey, Kurt, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Would love, as this continues to unfold, to bring you back, because I just think your insights are absolutely incredible. So thank you again for your time, and we hope to see you here again on L&D Unlocked real soon. Thanks, Kurt.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. This was great. Thank you.
This episode has been brought to you by BizLibrary. Head to bizlibrary.com for more information.